mom wrote in yesterday, had a series of questions that she was writing in, and I want to go back through some of them. She and I talked about it a little bit on the show. She's written in a follow-up, but I said I really want to get your take on it.
Okay.
Okay. So, but I want to go to the beginning of the questions here. Sure. I saved them. Okay. She said, another one from the haircut mom. My 14-year-old 8th grader has been saying school is boring almost every single day. He only likes math and robotics. He says even if he kind of understands what the teacher says, he isn't interested. He has poor comprehension. We've tried to get him into family discussions, but he can't tune in unless it's his preferred topic. The point system, at the minimum, gets him to school on time and to study. He gets 5 points for each 15 minutes. She went on to clarify later on that each one of those points translated into a little bit of tech time. So she says he's going through the motions. Any way we can make this internal. Also, if I turn into Tiger Mom, piano practice suddenly becomes a snap. But I don't want to be a Tiger Mom and have him trained to, I've trained him to be afraid of stern people, and thank you. I particularly wanted to talk about the Tiger Mom thing because sometimes I do that too, where I will be fine, and being reasonable and wonderful, and then all of a sudden I snap and I'm like,
we all do.
Right. And then I don't like myself then, but sometimes we get tricked into thinking that works. Because our kids hop to and go, oh, I'm going to do it right now because I don't want to have Tiger Mom come out.
Right.
But it's a false sense of getting them to do something because it's not going to, we know it's not going to maintain it for a long time.
Yeah, but you're not going to be the one maintaining the child forever anyway. Right. So it's sort of, I look at it in two different ways. Ideally, you want your child, obviously, to respond when you ask them nicely, but it takes a long time for that level of self-regulation to occur. And while that's not in place, and when you are Tiger Mom, which is, by the way, a very nice way of saying it, but
yes,
I like that way. Yes. But when you are Tiger Mom, I guess and if your child does actually do the thing that you're asking them to do, I mean, there's a reason that you're asking them to do something. You're trying to get them to do some sort of activity or skill that is beneficial to them. And so regardless of how you get it done, if they do it, then they will benefit from it and they will learn that it's a beneficial thing. In other words, if you tell someone, let's say this is a good example here where Tiger Mom gets the child to go through piano practice. Okay, well, there's a purpose to piano practice, right? It isn't necessarily a battle we all would pick, but at the same time, piano will give that child a certain level of activity in certain parts of the brain that no other activity will. And it'll also give the child a skill that not many people have. So, I take my hat off to parents who actually do put their kids through that sort of thing, because I think they're not only giving them a much more well-rounded education, but they're also teaching them skills that not everybody has, and it's very, very good for the child. So regardless of whether the child does it, if you're a regular mom or Tiger Mom, you are you're giving the child the ability to learn a new skill, and eventually over time Tiger Mom won't be there anyway. You're just not going to be there, and the child will have an internal sense of responsibility and an internal sense of, let's face it, fear and guilt, which only comes around if you had at some point Tiger Mom. Because if you have calm and sweet mom all the time, then the child never learns really to do the things that nobody wants to do. Who wants to go to school? Nobody wants to go to school. Everybody would much rather lay in bed and watch TV all day, right? But it is our job as parents to tell our kids, you don't have a choice. You have to go. Whether it takes you going when I'm nice or you going when I get mad at you, you still have to go. And after a while, the child realizes, I don't have a choice in this matter. And as they grow up, let's face it, they could finish high school and not every parent would then push their child to go further, and a lot of kids do go further because the habit internalizes. So, forcing him to practice piano right now might be a Tiger Mom job, but in the future, if he learns to benefit from it, for instance, if he plays and everybody goes, wow, that's amazing, you're such a great player, and so on, that could be maintained then by that new reward. So in real life, you're not going to be maintaining all of his behaviors. You're just forcing him to do them. Some will sift away and some will stay.
Okay.
And that's how to look at it.
So we should cut ourselves a little bit of slack.
You should totally cut yourself slack.
We're not striving to be the parent that's always yelling.
Right.
It's nice to have a mix, but that if we do get to there occasionally, we need to cut ourselves a little bit of slack for that. Okay.
But I also want to go back to the actual question here and answer this, Mom, because I think what you, and he is, I'm not sure. Sometimes our kids say they're bored and they really are bored. And sometimes our kids say they are bored when they just have a really hard time with that topic. So a child who is really, really good at math and robotics may most likely have problems with things like reading comprehension, listening comprehension, literature, things that are much more sort of abstract and not so concrete. And it's great that you've set up systems to reward, getting things done at a certain pace or rewards, tokens for getting stuff done. But consider the fact that might actually be difficult for the child, and that task might need some modeling, some help, some guidance, some breaking down into steps that are easier, some visual modifications, something that helps the child make it much more concrete. And then, of course, once you're able to do that, it'll just become easier for the child to pay attention. So I feel, let's say I can focus on things that are easy for me for a longer period of time. But if I have to focus on, let's say, I can listen to a movie in French, okay, for 2-3 hours, but I don't think I could do for about 2 hours of German. Could probably do an hour of German, but 2 hours of German, my brain is fried. So, and then, sometimes our kids don't know how to explain that, and they'll just say, I'm bored, because it takes so much effort for them to understand and focus on that particular subject. So perhaps evaluate that scenario and give your child some help as well.
Okay, and she did clarify a little bit, and I keep scrolling back and forth between, because I haven't actually gotten to the follow-up today yet, but she did clarify yesterday that each point that she gives, of those 5 points for 15 minutes, gets 1 tech minute of games and computer surfing, and he's been saving for a big reward, which she has is 300 points equals an airport trip, because he loves seeing airplanes and taking photos. He's not there yet because he does like playing games, and I'll have to work harder to find him smaller rewards. And I was saying, something that I fall into as a parent is that if I see the point system working a little bit, then there have been times when I've said to Jem, okay, well, I'm going to, do this big thing for 300 points. But then the thing that he wanted just a couple of points for is competing with the 300 points, and he didn't get to the 300 point thing. And I'd love your opinion about, when we give them something big, do we need to give them little markers along the way? Or do we need to make it at least once that it's 100 points so that he actually gets to the airport? What do you think?
Well, this is one of the most difficult, I think probably the most difficult systems to set up in all of behavioral intervention, or any kind of actual intervention. It's not just behavioral intervention, is a good token economy. Studying a good token economy is a lecture in itself. I mean, it has so many factors where the key factor to having an effective token economy, or a system of reward like this, the key factor is that the tokens must maintain a value that's meaningful. Now, some individuals will be able to handle waiting a long time in order to be rewarded. Okay, so an example of that is someone who, in real life, a real life example of that would be someone who is a very hard worker, goes to work, never misses a day, 9 to 5 every day, and all they really expect, or the reason that they're doing it is, they'll get maybe a 2% increase at the end of the year.
Right.
Okay. And then there's other people who need continuous like much more frequent reinforcers, and those are people who probably wouldn't last in a position like that, because they go from job to job, and they will only stay if they get either very regular wage increases or regular appreciation, and so on and so forth. Now, we start with needing much more continuous reinforcement, and everyone with maturity kind of gets to a point where they can go with a long-term reinforcement. If you switch too soon from a continuous type of reinforcement schedule to something that is much more long-term, the value of the thing could be lost. In other words, the person could not even it would seem so unattainable to the person that they wouldn't care anymore, and they'd be like, forget this, I'm just doing my thing because I don't even know, like, it's too far away.
Right.
And or the other way around, like if you have continuous reinforcement and the demand becomes too low and it becomes too easy to gain the reinforcement, then you start not caring because you're just able to get it all the time anyway. So you satiate on the reward. So it's an extremely intricate situation. With this particular case, I think, first of all, kudos. Like, I can't believe how much control you have. This is a fabulous system, it sounds like, that you've set up, and good for you. I don't have that much control going on in my house. That's pretty amazing. But I would just make sure, you know, it really comes down to the happiness factor of the child, the motivate. Are you getting what you wanted? Are you accomplishing what you wanted? If he's still doing his work and he's happy to put a few aside to build up for, you're teaching him savings. You're teaching him how to save, which is fabulous, you know. If he's happy doing it this way, you have the best system right now, which is ongoing as well as larger, okay? But you're also teaching him how to save. So you're saying, you know, you have 5 tokens you've achieved today, you received today, and he may choose to put 2 of them towards an immediate reinforcer and 3 of them in his savings bank. And that's, of course, the best thing you could possibly do, because you're teaching him how to save for the rest of his life. If that doesn't work, you know, other things you could do is, for instance, you could say, for every time that you reach a certain milestone in the continuous, like you get 10 in your continuous, you do 10, you know, like you take 1 token and you put it in and you do that 10 times. For every 10 times, I'm going to give you a point in your savings anyway. So you could connect them in different ways. But the highest is what you're actually doing, which is he has to keep an eye on both.
Right.
But again, which one is more correct has to do with the individual. Okay. You just have to measure the behavior change. Is the individual still changing their behavior? If they're not, increase the continuous. If they are, decrease the continuous and keep moving towards the long-term reinforcer.
Okay. And her follow-up question today about interest is, what do we do to get him to sustain enough interest to stay in the moment in class and in life? If he doesn't attend in class, that's wasted time and more time needed to learn the material. In life, he misses out socially and he can miss the boat. And she says safety. Thank you again for always seeing the positive and all the best. I think, you know, it's that I think we all need to fuzz out a certain amount of time, but teaching our kids, this is a really good question. How do we teach our kids when it's appropriate to fuzz out, when they need to focus, and how to get that focus?
Yes. So first of all, I mean, I'll give some short answers here, but go to our skills website and look under the whole executive functioning attention section. Well, it's not just the attention section. There's a lot in the attention section, but there's also a lot in inhibition, distractibility sections under the executive functioning curriculum. But what I want to tell you is a few different things about this. So I don't know your child, but depending on how, you know, so I'll give some examples. Sometimes we just tune out, right? We just zone out and we're almost daydreaming. So, you know, the most basic of what you need is a few things. You need reminders in his environment, and then what your goal is to make those reminders internalized, so that there's not always an external stimulus reminding him, but that he reminds himself. Okay, so what you need to do is first you need to put a schedule in his head. Okay, and you can start that with something as simple as a watch minder, right? So there's these watches that you set time, and it can vibrate on your arm every 10 minutes, 15, 20, whatever you decide, and it will literally have script that you can read. So it'll say, pay attention, or look at the teacher, or look at your book, or whatever it is, right? And so you do that. You start with that, and that's a very basic way to do it. This would be fabulous for anyone who daydreams, right? Mm-hmm. And all it does is it just wakes you up. It's kind of like, oh, okay, what was I doing? So that acts as the initial stimulus to kind of wake you up and point you to what it is. But remaining on task is a completely different thing. So you would have to measure, and it'll vary, as I said. So if you have an interesting concept, something that's of interest to you, you'll remain on task much longer than something that's not. So you have to take individual things, whatever it is that he's not interested in, where he loses his attention, and start with a baseline and see once he's on. So one was initiating attention, one is sustaining attention. So what is his baseline? How long does he sustain attention on the thing that you're concerned about? Let's say 10 seconds, and then he's gone. 5 seconds, and then he's gone, whatever it is. That you increase separately. That you shape up, again, through reward system. Like you can set a timer. You practice those things separately. The watchminder is easy. You could get that tomorrow, put it on his hand. It'll remind him to wake up every 10 minutes or 15 minutes. But whether or not he'll stay on task is something you have to teach him separately, and you have to just practice that. Like you will, let's say he's on task for 5 seconds. Well, that means he can get through maybe 3 sentences. Okay, start with that. Make him successful at that. And then make it, 4 sentences, and then he'll understand that and talk to you about that, and just increase the duration of time so that he remains successful. Now, this is really important, because one thing I've learned from all kids, not just our kids on the spectrum, but all kids, they get very... they avoid things that they're not very good at, right? All kids, they get embarrassed perhaps, or even just want to avoid failure, right? Every human being wants to avoid failure.
I fit in this category.
Everybody does, absolutely. So we tend not to do the things we're afraid of. I'm supposed to go. Today is my husband's birthday, and we're supposed to go golfing tomorrow. And I'm like, I love golf, but I don't want to play with a pro, And it's like I avoid it, right? And there's a part of me that just wants to avoid that because I know I'm going to mess up, right? So we all avoid things we're not good at, right? So, but if you can make that thing easy enough where your child is good at it, then they will tend to have more interest. They will tend to remain interested in it, pay more attention to it, and so on. Now, other tactics that help you stay focused are writing, talking, anything that involves exerted energy on your behalf. It's active energy versus passive energy will maintain attention, right? So, for instance, if he reads out loud, it'll force him to stay more active and involved than if he reads in his head. So, when you start something, and I'm giving you a lot of information. If you listen to this a few times, it'll make sense. When you start something, you always want to make it as easy as possible, right? So for instance, let's say you start with a task of reading something for 10 seconds, okay? Low amount of time, very active energy involved. And you could even have him standing, okay, because that's active energy versus sitting, where it's more likely to not pay attention or lose context. So he's reading a sentence for 10 seconds while standing up. That's your baseline. Increase from there. So now he can whisper it, or now he can actually sit down and do it, or now it's going to go to 20 seconds. And you modify each of those until it becomes reading in his head for 20 minutes. Sitting down or laying down even, and he still stays focused. So that's sort of the shaping procedure.
Okay.
Makes sense? A lot of content.
Yes, it makes sense. It will take patience.
It takes a lot of patience.
And not pushing it, which I think is one of the hardest things, but you can do it.
Well, a lot of times we think, behavior analysis says you modify behavior in 2 ways, antecedent and consequence, right? We tend to focus a lot on consequence control, which is things like token economy, rewarding, and so on. And we forget that sometimes you need to modify the antecedent. You need to modify what happens before the actual behavior. So that means making the task easier, making the situation stand him up. That's an antecedent modification. Things that make the task a lot easier. Prompting, modeling, all that sort of stuff, and then reward it.
Okay.
You start with tons of prompts and models and shaping and so on, and lots of reinforcers and low demand. and then you gradually go to higher levels of demand, less reinforcer.
Wonderful, wonderful. Great, great information. I want to get to the next question. Hi, thank you for your amazing show. My son has been in ABA for almost a year with some interruptions. He's almost 5. He started with 15 hours, then I pushed for 30. Good for you. And got 25. How do I encourage my team to do the skills program? They aren't familiar with it and use VB maps and stars. They feel since they are familiar with other programs, it's much faster. Would it be effective if I just did it since there is some overlap with VB map and other developmental programs?
I think, sure, if you, what a fantastic mom you are, first of all, or dad, I don't know which you are, but good for you for pushing for hours and doing the right thing. Good for you. I don't know. I don't know how to make people open their mind to other things. A VB map is good, but it's so basic. It's perhaps the way to show them. Perhaps the way to go is print out some of the advanced programs, like for instance, just the list of programs from the executive functioning curriculum and from the cognition curriculum and social curriculum. And, either just show it to them and say, what do you guys think of these lessons? And maybe that way they'll be enticed and interested. Or ask them, how would you teach a child to tell a joke? How would you teach a child to understand irony? How would you teach a child to join a conversation in a group? So ask them some of those advanced, how would you teach a child to do planning? Those types of things, or, saliency or inhibition or whatever it is that you find interesting. And see if they have any idea, and if they don't, then print out that lesson and show it to them. I think the vast majority of people think that skills is something parallel to VB Map or WebAbles or something like that, and it really isn't. It's it's just from a different perspective. It's not just about teaching verbal operants. Verbal operants are in skills. Perhaps you want to take the skills assessment index, answer the questions, and then go to the graph section and show the portion that is just the verbal operants so that they can see how it corresponds to VB map. I don't know. I mean, it's just a matter of getting them to open their mind a little bit and perhaps just showing them some aspects of the higher level of skills. The higher cognition levels would be of interest to them.
Yeah. I think that there's so much fear.
There's a lot of fear.
We're all run by fear. I think parents are afraid of what they don't know and what they won't understand. I think practitioners have been doing something a certain way, and they're afraid of the time that will take away from a child to learn something.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. You're absolutely right, Shannon. It's a matter of just falling into our old habits.
Yeah. And I think that we all have some element of this, but then it's like the matchsticks on the fire.
Yeah.
If somebody says to you, "Ooh, you should do skills," you go,
Yeah.
And then somebody else says, "Ooh, I learned to do this amazing thing from skills," and you go, "Ooh, I should probably check that out."
Yeah.
And then somebody else says, three other people come and say, we did skills and, it helped me to do this, it helped me to do that. And it starts to be this, burning conflagration in your head of, I really need to check this out. Be another matchstick on that fire. Just keep, you use it and have the benefit. And the more you do that, the more people are going to say, I've got to look at this.
Thank you. That's a really good idea. And is Adele still doing a show with you, Dr. Nadelsky?
Yes, on Thursdays.
Okay, great. So tomorrow.
Yes.
So would you repeat that question for her?
I will repeat that to her.
Because she will be able to answer you in much more detail by placing all of skills content and all of VB Map content side by side in her head. And she'll be able to tell you what role skills can play for you that is above and beyond VB Map. I know VB Map pretty well, and I know skills obviously inside and out, but one of the things that Adele did very early on was she literally contrasted all aspects of the two different programs together. So it would be very helpful
We'll definitely
too.
talk with her about that tomorrow. All right, so we had somebody who wrote in this morning and said, hello guys, I have a question about my nephew who will be 5 in March. He's nonverbal, still not potty trained. And the only way he can communicate is by pulling one of his parents because he does not point yet. He sometimes self-injurious. He hits himself on the head. He's not getting any services because his insurance does not cover it. I try to help by doing ABA work for a few hours a week, but have not been seeing much improvement. I'm not a therapist, but my son is also on the spectrum and I work with him, and he's gained language and some other things. What else can I do to help him? He still uses a bottle, so I use that for reinforcement, but sometimes that does not work either. It's so frustrating sometimes. I want to give up. And they said, thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. And this is nephew?
Nephew. But
wow.
Her son is also on
I
the
know.
spectrum.
You are just such an amazing person to be doing all of this. Wow. If you're they don't say what state they're in, but
no.
If you're in California and your insurance doesn't cover it, well, first of all, the state plan covers it in California. Many state plans cover it, the Obamacare plans. So you might want to look into that and get it through Medicare. So that's an important process. In addition to that, in California, obviously, if you have no coverage, the regional center system is obligated to cover your services. You need help. You cannot do this for 2 children alone. I could not do this for 2 children alone. I'm not sure I could even do it for 1 child alone because generally speaking, this is a lot. It requires a lot of energy, and that's why we have, even for our children who are receiving, let's say, 20, 30 hours of intervention, we have a team of 3, 4 people providing the intervention so that they don't burn out. So the shifts are generally 2 to 3 hours. Because we don't want our therapists to burn out and be exhausted and not be as active and as effective as they should be. Especially the 5-year-old really needs help, really needs intervention. It's okay if he or she is not speaking, but they need to be communicating. The self-injurious behaviors usually tend to occur out of frustration for the child because they can't communicate. And communication can be nonverbal initially, so we would teach the child a picture exchange communication system, so identification of little pictures or icons where they could touch the icon to indicate, or pull the icon and give it to you to indicate what they want. That's a PEX system, or we could also look at icons on an iPad and teach the child that way. But communication, some form of communication, is absolutely essential. For sure, if a child is not communicating and their only way of communicating is taking you by the hand to a particular object, they're going to get frustrated. It is a sign of intelligence to use you as an object that will help them attain what they want. To take a person to an object means, I can't get that, can you please get that for me? And that is a very good sign that the child is actually doing that. And it's very easy for us to teach the child to modify that and start actually doing it the right way, and giving you an icon or actually verbalizing the object eventually. But this is not something that you can do alone. You can certainly train. We can give you ways to train and learn. You can go on our Institute for Behavioral Training, go to the parent section, and pick modules that will teach you how to do the interventions. You can apply to go through the exact training that's required to become a registered behavior technician, an RBT, which is kind of the initial training that we do for our staff. And it would really teach you a lot in terms of how to change behavior, how to increase skills, how to reduce inappropriate behaviors. All of that. It would really teach you a lot of that. And you can use skills, which is our curriculum and assessment, and you could answer the questions, and skills will tell you all the things that you have to teach each child, the content areas and the exact lessons and so on. But teaching it really requires a lot of energy and a lot of time, and changing behavior is a thing that really, you need a village. So
Yes.
I really recommend that you focus on trying to get other people enlisted in this, and you can either look into what type of public funding there is in your state, other than just private insurance, and that would be the best way to go, because that will allow you then to hire local college students, and through our IBT system they can get trained. We can provide supervision at a distance, wherever we are, wherever you are. We can guide and supervise and teach the staff exactly what to do. That part is easy. It's just the matter is getting teams together. I mean, and you ideally, if you had a team of about 4 really good people or 5 really good people, you could split them between the 2 kids and they could alternate. And so that way you could use the team of therapists with the 2 kids. And if they are, I really recommend that you try to find funding first. But if you don't, a lot of people hire local, let's say, babysitters or high school students, and we still train them for you and help you to oversee the program.
Yesterday on the show, we did an entire segment. It was in the first hour of the show that where we went through over 30 different resources where you can go to for funding.
That's great.
So you can reference that on yesterday's show, and we gave the website for every single one of them that you can apply for those things.
Fantastic.
But I would also tell you, too, that there is somebody who I think is a perfect example, Maddie, her family in North Dakota, who they got their local church involved.
There you go.
And maybe if Kelby has it, he can play it during our next break. But they got their local church involved because there wasn't money, there wasn't funding, because this was a couple of years ago. They used skills, they trained their staff, and had miraculous results.
Yeah, and that's a fabulous story, and I love to hear that.
It's
and
hard.
I think it's very hard. It's a lot of work, but sometimes that's the only option we have. Years and years ago, I mean, if we have a video that we made many years ago, Recovered, Journeys Through Autism and Back, and if you look at that, one of the children on that lived in a very remote area of Iowa where mom did actually use neighbors and people from the town to come and help. And I mean, you can see some of those people on the video, and they became really good therapists over time. So I think it's you just have to reach out for help.
Yeah, and people have written to us and said that if you don't have a church that you can go to look for people like that there are sororities that there's a national sorority that has picked autism as their mission.
Wonderful.
And there have been sororities in different places around the country that a house of sorority sisters will adopt a family, learn to do therapy, and do that, and that is their what do you call it? Your service project.
Yes, that's so fantastic.
Community service project. There have been other organizations. We've heard of Knights of Columbus adopting families and saying that they will learn the techniques. You just got to think outside the box.
And we are happy to provide all of the training, and especially if you find a church group or a group that's doing this as a sort of act of kindness, I will match that and give the training to you for free, so that those people can train and know what to do for your child.
Okay, that's an amazing pledge. Thank
Absolutely.
you for that. That's wonderful. So you gotta get organized.
Yes.
And know that you're going after Moby Dick. But as I love to say, if you're going after Moby Dick, pack the tartar sauce. Put some tartar sauce someplace where you can see it, and know that you're doing the best mission of your life, and you're going to get it done. I want to get to one more question before we're out of time. My son has recently started not wanting to go to school. His ABA shadow was there 2 times a week and faded to once a week. He is in a typical half-day school program, almost 5. He starts crying the night before, saying he doesn't want to go and seems anxious. He is limited with language, but did say he doesn't want to write his name. Writing is very difficult for him, and at school they are pushing him to write on his own, to write his name. One of the therapists says he does need to write his own or at least try. The OT says he has a fine motor delay, so it's difficult for him, even though some days he can do it and other days he can't. The teachers feel since some days he can do it, the days he can't, he doesn't want to. I'm feeling uncomfortable with this because I know he cries when he asks for help, and they tell him to do it on his own. A nice way, but they are not special ed teachers. Any thoughts, feedback? Am I just being overprotective?
No, it's okay to be overprotective, especially in our world. I think you need to be. But I would just make the task a little bit easier. And there's a million ways you can make the task easier. You can require him to write half his name. You can require him to trace his name. You can require him to, do a less perfect job. I don't know what his exact ability is. So on the days take the days where he can write his name, take that and just modify it to make it easier somehow for him. And then that would be his new baseline, so that the teachers would then reward him initially for the easier thing, not for the full name, but the easier thing. And then you gradually require him again to write it better and better. So it's no big deal. This is one of those things that parents always worry about, where you achieve a certain milestone and then parents are always worried about going down from that milestone. Well, don't be. This is life. For instance, you learn a sport, okay, whatever, skiing, and you can ski a certain way and you will be rewarded for that. But the next time you go out, maybe you're not up to it, maybe you have cramps, maybe you're just fearful today, whatever it is, you're not going to be as good as you were last time. That doesn't mean that anything devastating has happened. This is practice. Practice, some days you're really good, other days you're not good. It doesn't matter. Consistency is mastery. So the fact that he's now, even you look at someone who's like the best golfer in the world, there's no consistency, right? Yeah. That is the challenge of golf, for instance, is that people strive not only to be good, but to be good consistently. And so the same thing with our kids. Don't panic about the fact that some days he can't. I don't like the fact that teachers would press him to the point where he doesn't like going to school anymore. That should never happen. Things should always remain manageable and fun. He could be avoiding, absolutely, but when a child avoids, all you have to do is model and prompt a little bit more. You just have to drop down to a little bit easier. That's all. And then reinforce more. There's two things. Drop down the demand and increase the reinforcer. You will always balance those two things. Is the demand too high for the level of reinforcement for him? Probably yes. That's why he doesn't want to go. Yeah. Reduce the demand, increase the reinforcer. It'll become fun again. And then gradually shift it back so that it's high demand, fewer little reinforcer.
What strikes me, though, is it sounds like the team is not on the same page, and that's causing anxiety for everybody, including mom.
Especially mom.
Yeah, and that maybe it's worthwhile to ask for a meeting for the team, and tell me what you think about this, to get them on this page. Because if the teacher is in this point of view of, well, he can do it on some days, so it's just that he doesn't want to and is pushing, that's not going to be helpful right now.
Right. Parents have to decide if it's worth the conversation. Sometimes it is worth the conversation with the teacher, where you basically will explain exactly what you said, Shannon. Yeah. Absolutely. And sometimes teachers treat parents like they don't know anything.
It's true.
And so you have to decide what type of teacher you're dealing with, and you have to come to a decision in terms of how you want to approach this. But the bottom line is, the task needs to be made a little bit easier, and the reinforcer needs to be made a little bit higher. And whenever you have failure, just do that. Yeah. And then you can always gradually increase demand and reduce reinforcer. That's life.
That's true. And sometimes when I have had a teacher who won't see it my way, what I've been able to do, and I had to do it sneakily, but I would promise Jem, do it, and I will give you the thing you want when you come home.
Yes. Absolutely.
And then I had to deliver that. I had to not mess up on that, so that he knows if something happens at school that doesn't go his way, I will make it up to him when he comes home.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, eventually the whole thing has to be internalized. You can't maintain that for a long time. You'll run out of reinforcers. Over time, the child has to just begin enjoying being at school. Most children, they enjoy being at school due to friends. That's their number one reinforcer, is seeing friends, friends talking about how you look today, what you did today, and so on. School is a side effect. Actually, academics is a side effect, right? School is the social environment for our kids. But for our children on the spectrum, often, sometimes it becomes just academics that they're interested in. Sometimes it is really only their only way of socializing with others. You have to find out what the reinforcers are for your child, and you have to keep track of them throughout life.